All right, hello there. This is lesson 1.7 on measures of center. The three types of ways to measure the center of a distribution is the mean, the median, and the mode. Here are descriptions of each of them. The mean is really just the average of the numbers. So we add all the numbers up, divide by the number of numbers. The median is we rank the numbers in order from least to greatest and find the middle of that ranking. And the mode is the one that's most common. So let's look at a few examples. Let's say we have 10 test scores here. Okay. When it comes to the mean, we don't have to order these. So we can just add all of them up. So take them in the order that they're given, right? 65, 70, and so on all the way down the line. We add all those scores up and we divide by the number of numbers, right? Or the number of tests that were taken. Looks like the mean test score was a 67.4. Not a great average for the group. Okay, the median. What we do with the median is we order the numbers from least to greatest. So you see we have 2 65s, 3 66s, 67, 8, 70, and 71. So what we do, in this case, we have an even number of tests, right? So we have n equals 10. So we count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the left, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the right. You can see that there is no value right in the middle. So what we do is we average those two numbers, right? Those two numbers that are left. And this will always happen if you have a set that has an even number of elements, right? So an even number of tests in this case. So our median number would be 66.5. Our mode, as described above, is the most common of the test scores. And we can see that we have 3 66s. Now, let's say that a grouping of test scores has two modes. This is called a bimodal distribution. So let's say, for example, there were 3 65s and 3 66s. Then the mode would be both 65 and 66. That doesn't come up as often, but that is how you would go about a scenario like that. Okay, let's continue with another example. Okay, so here's an example. We're given now in a frequency table similar data. So what this frequency table tells us is that there are 5 students who scored a 65, 4 that scored a 68, 6 that scored a 70, and 5 that scored a 71. So we can see immediately that our mode is going to be that score which had the most outcomes, right? So we can see our mode then is 70. Okay, now this different orientation of how the data is given in this what's called a frequency table, as opposed to just a list of numbers, requires us to do a little bit more organization, right? Because as we can tell, how many students were there? There'd be 5 and 4 and 6 and another 5. That's 20 total students. So we got 20 scores to add up. Now, instead of writing all the numbers out, what we can do, as you can see here, is we took 65 times 5. That's not 65.5. That should be 65 times 5. 68 times 4. 70 times 6. And 71 times 5. We add all those up, we divide by 20, and we get a mean score of 68.6. Now, you can see this thing. This is called a stem and leaf plot. And what a stem and leaf plot is it takes all scores in the 60s, and it orders them, right? So that would mean 5 65s, right? And then we had 4 68s. And then we had so-and-so 70s, right? It looks like we had 6 70s and 5 71s. And now what we do from here, you guys, is we take our greatest value, knock it off, least value, knock it off. And we continue that process until we get to the middle number. Now what you'll notice is that since we have an even number of test scores, what did I do? I did something wrong. I might have missed something here. Anyways, if I have an even number of test scores, you'll kind of see that same visual, that would be our middle point, right? Oh, this is why. I think we would knock that off, and then this would be our middle spot right here, right? So we got 10 test scores to the right of that, 10 to the left of that. So I'm going to average these two values. Those values would be 70 and 70. So you can kind of visualize that this was my 11th test score, this was my 10th test score, and so if I average 70 and 70, I still get 70. Okay, that is the median test score for that example. All right, let's continue and look at another example here. Okay, take example 1. It says you got a 45, 52, 48, and 35 on your 4 quizzes in math. What do you need to get on the next quiz so that you will have an average of 44? Okay, so let's do an initial setup and then I'll walk you through what they were doing here. Okay, so your average test score, I'm going to call it X bar. Your average test score would be the sum of your scores. So let's take your first 4 that are known, and let's add in, let's call it M for your final test score. So after your final test score, you would have taken 5 tests or quizzes. So if I add up my 5 test scores, one of which I don't know, and I divide by 5, that should give me my average. Well, I know what I want my average to be. Okay, so I'm going to add up these 4 test scores, which I believe, based on the information over here, would be 180. So in my first 4 tests, I got a total sum of 180 points. I don't know what I got on my 5th test, but I do know my average is 44. Now this becomes a nice algebra problem where I can solve for M relatively easily. I multiply both sides by 5. What that does is that reduces this 5, making 220 equal to 180 plus M. Now M again is my 5th test or quiz score. I subtract 180 from both sides, and in order to maintain an average of 44, it looks like I have to get a 40 on my last quiz. Okay, now a slightly different type of example here in example 2. You have an average score of 78 on 4 quizzes you have had so far in math. What do you need to get on the next test so that your average will be an 80? Okay, so what I'm going to do in this particular case is, if I know that my average of my first 4 test scores is 78, then that means the sum of my first 4 test scores, which let's call W, would look like that, right? If I took my total points divided by 4, I should get this average, right? So what that means to me then is that W, the sum of the first 4 scores, would be 4 times 78. 4 times 78, 280 and 32, that's 312. So the sum of my first 4 test scores was 312. Okay, so it says, what do you need to get on the next quiz so that you'll have a quiz average of 80? So if I want my first 5 test scores to be an average of 80, okay, I got to do the math to find X here. Now, if you look at the setup over here, this setup is slightly different. Maybe I can talk to that in just a moment. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to multiply both sides by 5, like I did similarly in the problem above. It gives me 400 is equal to 312 plus X. Okay, that gives me my final test score if I subtract 312 from both sides, which would be 88. So if I wanted to raise my average from 78 to 80, clearly I'd have to get a higher score, right, to raise that up, and that score that's necessary on the 5th quiz would have to be an 88. All right, let's continue on the last couple slides. Okay, summation notation. Now this slide here is kind of messy, but what I want to do is kind of dial you into what this thing means, right? So when we took X bar, we talked about it on the previous slide. We took like our first test score, our second test score, our third test score, all the way up to like however many test scores we wanted. Let's say there was N tests. Now that isn't always pleasing to students. Like you could plug in an 8, like you had 8 tests or 10 tests or whatever that might be. But to find the average, what we essentially did was we divided by the number of tests or quizzes. So x bar is really 1 over n times this sum of our first n tests. Okay, now this right here, this 1 over, or this x1 plus x2 plus x3 can be signified using a shortened notation. Okay, this symbol right here means to add up. Okay, and I would add up from I equals 1 up to I equals n of all the x sub i's. Now that's, if this is the first time you've ever seen summation notation, that's probably pretty confusing, but let's lay it out. So what do I do to kind of expand this? I plug in a 1, okay, and then I plug in a 2. Oops, I want to explain the plus in a second. Then I plug in a 2, then I plug in a 3, and I continue this until I plug in the last term. So this is the end of the index. This is the beginning. So I start at 1, and I go in numerical order all the way up to n. Now this symbol here means add them all up. So that symbol tells me to take and add all of these terms up, all the way up to the nth term. Therefore, you can see that x bar is 1 over n times the sum of the first n terms. Okay, so let's use this in a practical example. Look at what I've got here. I got a 25, 35, 24, 32, 28. Okay, so x bar would equal 1 over 5 times the sum of these values. And I recognize that I have all these numbers written up here already in blue marker. But what I want to do is kind of lay it out for you deliberately. There's our first test, 25. There's our second test, 35. There's our third test, 24. Fourth and fifth. So that's why I have this sum from 1 up to 5 of all of my x sub i's, right? This should really be listed as x sub I. Okay, look at example 2. I'm adding up all of these numbers and dividing by the number of numbers, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if I want the average. So there's x1, x2, x3, x4, x5, x6. And you can see how this summation right here goes from the first term, which is 5, up to the 6th term, which is 4. I add all those up, I divide by the number of numbers, and I get my average. So I don't know what my average comes out to be. Nobody calculated it for me. So what is this? That's 8. That's 8. 16. That makes 18, and 7 more is 25. Okay, so 25 over 6. That's not a real nice number. I think that comes out to be 4.16, something like that. So that would be the average of those numbers. Okay, let's take a look at the last slide and get you on your way. Looks like the last slide is just the slide telling us go do our homework. So remember, we did 3 measures of center: mean, median, and mode. See you guys in the next video.